Hey guys, this is lesson 9.6 for algebra. 9.6, we are factoring yet again. We have our normal blanket equation, which is a quadratic formula, and we're trying to factor it into two binomials. So this gets a little bit tricky though, because you can notice you have a number out front. It's not just a squared or n squared, it's a 6n squared. And I want to try and get my numbers so that I get a 23 here and a 7 here. So if you look at my answer, I'm left with a 2n plus 7 and 3n plus 1. It's kind of a little bit tricky. What they do is they take the factors of 6, 1 and 6, and 2 and 3, and the factors of 7, 1 and 7, and they have to play with it. If you look at all of this information, you play around with it until you get 23 out of your numbers. So then they got that here, and they put one number here and one at the end, and one number here and one number here. So let's try an example. So I'm going to list my factors of 2, which are just 1 times 2. This is nice because it's only 2 factors for each. So what ends up happening is you have 1y squared plus 1. No, sorry, plus 2. And then you have 2y squared plus 1. So each one of these goes in one spot. And then your most important part in all of this is the check, because you have to make sure you're doing it correctly. So 1y times 2y, is 2y squared. 1y times 1 is 1y. 2 times 2y is 4y. And then 2 times 1 is 2. So I get 2y squared plus 5y plus 2. So if then I look back up here, does it match this? Yes. So I know that my answer is correct. There's a little bit of trial and error in this process. Okay, so here's another example. Now the only thing different is when this is negative. When it's negative, you're going to have when both are negative, you have one positive sign and one negative sign in your binomials. So when they're both negative, you're going to have one positive and one negative. So it's the same process, okay? I have to find my factors of 5 and my factors of negative 3. So 5 is 1 times 5, and this is 1 times negative 3. So now you want to play around with your numbers. Okay? I want to get 5d squared. So I know that I'm going to have to do 1d and 5d, because 1 times 5 would be 5d squared. So that would get me my first multiplication. Now my end, I want 3. So my two last numbers have to give me 3. So I know it's going to be 3 and 1, because that would give me a 3 at the end, and I want it to be negative. So I'm going to play around with this and see if it works. So 1d times 5d is 5d squared. 1d times 1 is 1d. Negative 3 times 5 is negative 15d. And then negative 3 times 1 is negative 3. This works because then 1d plus 15d gives me my negative 14d minus 3. So sometimes you might have to flip things around and place them in the correct order, trial and error. So there's my answer, and I know it's correct because I double checked it. Factoring out a monomial first. So here is one way to do this. Now if you look at this problem right here, it has some huge numbers, okay? So what they did is they looked at the GCF and they said, well, there's a 5. I can take this 5 out, and then I can factor it like that, and then I just had to factor this part right here. So once I take that 5 out, And then if you notice, they factor this whole thing and they get down to here, but then they just put the 5 back onto the front of it. So here's an example. If I look here, I can take a 2 out first. So I'm going to take out a 2, and that leaves me with v squared minus 6v plus 5. So I took the 2 out, and that would give me, if I refactored it back in, I would get back to my original equation. Now I need to factor just this part. So I need to make it into 2 binomials. So I know I'm just going to have v squared as my first. And then I have to get 5. But look, it has to be a negative 6 in the middle. So if I did negative 5 and negative 1, negative 5 plus negative 1 would give me my negative 6, and negative 5 times negative 1 is a positive 5. So if I try this, I get v squared minus 1v minus 5v plus 5. So that works. V squared minus 6v plus 5. So I know that this is correct. However, I need to add back on my 2 at the beginning. So right there, I have factored out a monomial of 2, and then I factored the inside parentheses. All right, that's it for your notes.